What is up, my movie fanatics, and welcome to another Fear Face-Off. Now, this one's a little bit different. This one's from some supporters. They gave me some more suggestions, and I was like, hey, I gotta check out these films. What I got to check out was The Last House on the Left and The Shining. Yes, that is right, The Shining. We will get to that in a minute, talk more about it. I will explain everything. Most people didn't even know there was a remake, or if you even want to consider a remake, but we'll get right into that in a minute. But before I do, I want to thank 4K Cinema HD for recommending The Last House on the Left, and I want to thank Blu-ray Anonymous for recommending The Shining. So let's just jump right into it. So I'm going to start with The Last House on the Left. Great film. Actually, a very interesting fact for you guys. I didn't even know that that there was a remake of this film. I remember seeing the film actually right after it was released on DVD. I remember renting it, and I fell in love with the film. So it was really, really cool, and it was a fun privilege to check out the original film. It got me all pumped because I kind of knew already. I mean, I already knew a lot about the remake, so you know, it made it more interesting at this point. So, let's jump right into some of the fun facts for you guys. The original film was made in 1972. The director was Wes Craven. Sandra Peabody played Mary. Lucy Grantham played Phyllis, which was her best friend. David Hess played Krug. Is it Krug or Krug? Whatever. I can never get his name straight. I'm pathetic, I know. And Fred J. Lincoln as Fred. And the remake was made in 2009. The director was Dennis Iliad. I got the names right this time. Holy crap, I'm on a roll. Garrett Dillahunt played Krug. Michael Bowman played Morton. And Ricky Lindholm played Sadie. Which in this case, she played the best friend of Mary. So, what were the big differences with these films? Well, right off of the bat was completely different. Both fathers played a doctor, so there was nothing different there. You guys know that. But in 1972, you start off with this young, rebellious, crazy girl wanting to go to a concert. She comes down, like, you know, they show her in the beginning getting ready, and then she comes down, she's talking to her parents, and she's very close to her parents, very typical teenager. You know, parents worry a lot when you're a teenager, and she's kind of trying to grow up and flee the nest, but mom and dad are still up her butt. So she ends up going to this concert, even though dad didn't want her to, but she does anyway. He gives her the chance, and they end up meeting a guy on the way to the concert. Now, her best friend Phyllis is accompanying her. So they meet this guy, as I said before, because they want to get a little bit of the devil's grass, if you know what I mean. If you don't know what I mean, I'm talking about marijuana. So I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to look at 2009 before we go into more depth of the story. In 2009, the movie opens right up with a completely different story. You have these two cops, and they're taking a Fed to jail, obviously. Whether he was just caught or whatever, they don't really say. But anyway, they stop at a railroad track, and they get hit by a car, and these two people come out. They happen to be his friends, and they escape safely. So they save his friend, and, well, I don't want to say save him, because he's a prisoner, but you know what I'm saying. It may help him escape. That's the best way to put that. So they help him escape, and that is that. So then let's go to the family. Well, the family decides to take a vacation because dad's working all the time. He's a doctor. They want to get away, so they go camping. And they have this big, beautiful house. I mean, it's gorgeous. And there is a guest house. So Mary wants to stay in the guest house because, once again, same as before, she's a rebellious young teenager. She's 17 or 18. She's a swimmer. She's all about high school. She doesn't care about anything else, you know, but friends and boys. Well, you find out when she's in the guest house, you see necklaces, and you find out that her big brother Ben passed away. So that's a key part, so remember that. So then back in 1972, where does the prisoner come into play? Well, actually, they don't have any scene like that. The only thing that they have is on the radio that a few felons have escaped jail, and they're well-known rapists, child molesters. I mean, they use like the work. I mean, they actually say that. So you know something's gonna happen. So meanwhile, back in 2009, Mary wants to go out with her friend Sadie. She's working at a local grocery store, and she goes to meet her there, and this weird kid, Justin, walks in, and he's looking to buy some stuff, and he wants cigarettes. Obviously, he's not 18, so Sadie, being the young, rebellious, crazy girl, says, well, what are you going to pay me? He says, I can score you with some marijuana. So they go back to his place to get the marijuana. Back in 1972, as I said before, they talk to this guy. They say, can you hook us up with some marijuana? And he says, yeah, follow me. So they end up in two different hotels. This is where it's exactly the same. Long story short, it was a trap. Both movies take place as a trap. And they want her and her friend to have some fun with, because these are felons, guys. I mean, what do you expect? So there's a lot of taunting, there's a lot of teasing in both, and they end up beating them and raping them. You don't see much of the raping or anything in 1972, but in 2009 there is a real long rape scene, and then it comes down to Gretchen ends up dying in the film, which is the best friend, and Sadie ends up dying as well. So it's just it's just Mary left. So in 2009, remember I said she was a swimmer. She says, I like to swim. She goes away. She starts swimming in the lake, because that's where they are. And she gets shot. And I guess, they think she's dead, because she kind of stops. She gets hit in the shoulder, and she just kind of just floats. They think she's dead. 1972, the same thing happens, but after they beat her and rape her, she decides to walk into the lake, and she's floating there, and then they shoot her, and they think she's dead. So, back to, we'll stay more with 1972. Well, the parents haven't heard anything. They're freaking out. They can't figure out what is going on. Next thing you know, they call the cops. The cops are looking around, and the cops are also hear that the prisoners are in the area. I forgot to mention where they beat and raped and killed Gretchen and Mary. They didn't kill Mary, but they shot her in by the lake, is actually right by her house. 2009, as I said, the lake would have to swim across the lake. So basically, in 1972, it's in her backyard when all this goes down. So, both movies have a really cool, interesting plot and twist, and it's right now. Both movies in 1972, they say that their cars broke down, and they knock on Mary's parents' door, and they say, can we stay here? And they feed him, they take care of him, they wash him up. They say, sure, stay here. You don't have a car, the phones are down, blah, blah, blah. Stay here, enjoy your time. In 2009, it's pretty much the same difference, but because of the struggling and the fighting that Mary and Sadie put these people through, they end up wrecking the car. So the people say there was an accident, and of course the parents welcome in with open arms, and they patch up one of the convicts. They sew up his nose, and they do a couple other things. So it ends up being the same thing. So this is where it gets interesting, and let's wrap it up with this. In 1972 and in 2009, the parents find out that these people have hurt their daughter. In 1972, the kid who is kind of rebellious and doesn't agree with what the other people are doing to these girls, his name is JR, he ends up getting really sick. He's puking in the bathroom. Mom wakes up. Mary's mom wakes up and sees a necklace that she gave him I'm sorry, that she gave Mary, and it is a peace sign. Well, how he got that necklace was Mary was trying to seduce him to go to her house to stop all of this madness. So, Mom and Dad at this point are freaking out, and they run out of the house and they find Mary. She is dead. They lost her. So Dad decides to take it upon himself and kill these people. In 2009, it's sort of kind of the same thing. Once the people were settled in the house, they hear a knocking on the back door. Here, Mary swam the whole way in the lake, and Dad and Mom picks her up. And they also, Dad in this one though ends up reviving her and doing some real fancy medical mumbo jumbo, which was a really cool part. But a necklace is still involved. Remember the kid Justin? Well, during the rape scene, the necklace is ripped off, and Justin takes it and puts it around his cocoa. Mary's mom ends up giving them cocoa. So he puts it around the glass in the kitchen, and then they find everything out. So once again, Dad is hell-bent on revenge, and he wants to take care of them. So in 1972, he ends up accomplishing that by killing everybody. But this one was very interesting in a sense where he ends up using a chainsaw a lot, and the dad gets beat up pretty good. He's an older gentleman in this film, and he gets beat up and he struggles. But he ends up shooting the one guy, Krug, the main guy, and they get into a fist fight. And actually, Mom ends up killing two of the people. She kills the woman by, the woman's running from the mom because they get into a big fist fight, and she slits her throat with a knife because she falls into the pool. And then she also seduces one of the men, and she is performing oral on him, and she bites his willy off. Yeah, she bites his willy off. It was pretty intense. 2009, pretty much the same thing, but Mom is more taking care of Mary at this point. So they go across to the guest house where Mary was staying, because that's where they told the people to stay. There's a lot of fighting. The woman gets shot in the eye by the mom. She ends up shooting him, and Mom and Dad both kill Francis in the main house by, oh my god, they beat him, and they put his hand in a garbage disposal, and they smash a hammer through his head. It is so gory and so good. But as I said before, it comes down to the main fight with Dad and Krug, and Dad ends up fighting him, almost loses. So remember Justin, he tries to help out, but he ends up getting knocked out. So Mom and Dad actually in this one end up beating Krug to death. And that pretty much ends it, but the big difference is here, in 1972, the big difference is that once Krug dies, the cop just kind of shakes his head and the movie ends. And in 2009, they have a boathouse with a boat, and they all end up getting into the boat, and they're going away. They're trying to get married some help. But remember Justin, I keep bringing him up. He actually ends up going with them. And I guess they end up taking care of him, and they all survive. So as I said, the big differences with The Last House on the Left is Mary's survival and how Mom and Dad take care of these people, but the plot itself is still really good. So who's going to take the cake on this one? Well, it's going to have to be a tie, guys, because both movies were awesome. And they were unique in their own way. They're both gory, they're both great acting. No special effects really needed, technically. I mean, yeah, you're going to have more blood and guts with the new one, but other than that, that was that. So once again, guys, it is a tie for The Last House on the Left. So now let's talk about The Shining. We all love The Shining. We've all probably seen The Shining. But I'm going to do this one completely and utterly different. This is actually going to be real quick. I'm not giving any spoilers away. I will talk about the differences, but I don't want to give away too many spoilers, especially the end. Because I think that if you haven't seen The Shining, you should definitely check it out. And if you haven't seen the miniseries in 1997, which is based off of Stephen King's book, The Shining, then you need to go check this out. So, let's jump right into this. In 1980 was the original movie. The director was Stanley Kubrick. Jack Nicholson played Jack. Shelley Duvall played Wendy. And Danny Lloyd played Danny. Pretty interesting. Then we had a 3-part mini-series. It was called Stephen King's The Shining, and it was in 1997. The director was Mick Garris. Rebecca De Mornay played Wendy. Steve Weber played Jack. And Cortland Mead played Danny. Very interesting. So, this is how I'm going to do this one, guys. We all know The Shining. We've all seen it. Do you remember how this movie takes place? Jack Torrance, a struggling man trying to help his family, ends up getting a job at the Overlook Hotel as the caretaker. Now, we all know that, and we all know that the hotel has a crazy, crazy past. We all remember the man, Mr. Grady, who was the caretaker before Mr. Torrance was there. Now, 1980, we remember Mr. Grady. The way he kills his family is the infamous axe. He axes him down, and then he blows his head off. In the miniseries, Mr. Grady is involved, but you don't get as much family. You don't get the family killing. You just get the Mr. Grady death. And you guys remember in 1980, there was the twins. The twins were Mr. Grady's daughters. You have none of that in the miniseries. None at all. The miniseries is amazing, folks. Absolutely just phenomenal. It actually made me have a eye-opening and realize that Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was far better than I ever could have imagined. Was there differences? Yes. But you're talking about this movie is based off of a book. You can only do so much, and you want to capture your audience, and you want to do different things. Do I think Kubrick made the right decisions? Heck yes. Everything he did flowed so nice. To me, it's a perfect movie in a lot of ways. So you don't have the twins. So what do they focus on in the miniseries? Well, they focus on, if you all remember the end of The Shining in 1980, you see Jack in a photo. And he has all the people around, and there was a big ball. There was a big party there. That is what the miniseries is focused on, folks. All about the party. All the people who attended the party. It's a masquerade ball. And there is a lot similarities, meaning that you really, really, really get to know Jack Torrance and who he is and what he came from the miniseries. You really get to see a new side of Danny and the old called Shining, his ability to see the future and be able to talk to the dead, I guess, more or less. They really focus on that too in the miniseries. You see that in the original film, but not as much. Once again, they're pressed for time and they just can't physically do it, and it still worked though. It was perfect. And that is so cool. One of the big major differences that they do in the miniseries is that Jack Torrance is very handy. He works on the hotel. You see him fixing the roof. He shovels off the snow. He does all of these kinds of like handyman work. But the most important thing, and I want you guys to remember this, okay, if you decide to watch this miniseries, that he has to depressurize the boiler room every night. He has to turn a valve and the pressure has to go down. Remember that. And another huge, huge difference, other than the girls, is we remember in 1980 there was that huge, beautiful hedge maze. That is not in this miniseries as well. Don't worry, folks. You're probably like, well, what are you talking about, Doc? How is this the same? They have hedges, but they're hedge animals, and there's a park there, which also has a huge role, just as big as the maze. And then we get to the ending where Jack, we all know, is chasing Danny in the maze in 1980, and he never gets out of the maze. He never finds anybody, and because he's mad, he's crazy. He's hearing voices and stuff that kill him. Kill his family, you know, get rid of the problem. You hear Mr. Grady say that a few times. And he freezes to death. And then the movie ends, they get away. One other character I want to talk about really, really quick is Mr. Dick Holland. He is the head chef, and he also has the shining ability. He talks a lot to Danny in the movie and in the miniseries, and he really teaches him a lot about shining and what shining does. But you see Danny use more of the shining ability in the miniseries. It is so good. So why don't I want to tell you the end of the miniseries? Well, because it's so perfect. So perfect. They really focus on everything. I feel like if you watch The Shining, I think a lot of people do this with The Shining. You watch it and you kind of scratch your head because it ends so cool, and you're just like, well, what does that mean? You know, was Jack really part of this family, or was he sucked in like everybody else, you know? There's so many theories and stuff on it. If you guys remember, Danny has a best friend named Tony. Tony has a huge role in the miniseries. You actually get to meet Tony. You see what Tony looks like. They put him to a face. It's really cool. Very cool. Very interesting. So that's where I want to stop with that, guys. So, can you really give The Shining... I guess what I'm coming down to with this is, can you really give The Shining a face-off? No, you can't. Because I watched The Shining and I had a lot of scratch-your-heads moments. And I've always been... I mean, I've seen this movie 100 times. But then I watched this miniseries, and at the end, the last 5 minutes, I literally had a jaw drop, and I couldn't believe what I just watched. It was that good. And I'm telling you, it is spot on. Spot on. I think Stanley Kubrick just did a phenomenal job. I think, you know, with a typical... When you're doing a movie with books, like I said before, you're pressed and you can only do so much. So I truly believe he did a phenomenal job. As for the miniseries, it was the best miniseries I have ever seen, hands down. So you guys need to check them both out. Remember, there are some differences. As I said, there's no hedge maze. You have hedge animals instead. There's no twins. There's no axe. Believe it or not, folks, there's no axe in the miniseries. It is a croquet. It's called Denver Croquet. They explain it, and I'm not going to go into detail. But I highly recommend both of these films, and I want to thank 4K, Cinema HD, and Blu-ray Anonymous again for recommending these. I don't even want to give... I can't. You can't compare... You really can't. You can't... When it comes to The Shining, you just can't say who won, because... To me, they were identical, but they were amazingly done in their own unique way. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on another Fear Face-Off. Guys, we only have one more. We're going to have one more before my 24-hour. We're going to do some classic hack and slash killers. So we're going to see some Michael Myers. We're going to see some Freddy Krueger. We're going to see some Jason. And if I have enough time, I will do Leatherface, but we will have to see. So until then, everybody, as always, thank you so much. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're liking this series. And as always, take care and happy watching.